Welcome back to the studio. We're going to do a little continuation here. We've talked about different types of drawing, the different characters, cartoons. We've done a little bit with coloring. We're going to do a little bit more today. So I have my well-used set of watercolors here. And this is a little travel kit that I use. These are pretty nice ones. So here's a cartoon that I've already drawn. And we're going to talk about coloring this in. So let's take a look here. Now, as I've said before, when I do color, a lot of times it's pretty random. So I'm going to just pick some things. And I want to talk about the technique that I use. And this is just the way that I do it. The technique of watercolor in the cartoons. So let's start with his shirt, for example. Choose a blue. And I've got a little bit of a paper towel here just so we can kind of dab it a little bit. Because when I'm doing this, I do more like a wash, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So I'm going to build up the color. And what I like to do, you've seen my videos before, is I like to do a little bit with shading. And so I would want to have the darker side. I'm going to assume that light is coming from this direction. And I'm going to keep you in the loop here as we go along. I'm going to raise this up so that you can see our progress. But I'm having the darker color towards the side. Now this is not watercolor paper, so that it will react a little bit differently. It soaks up the water and the color quite a bit. So we have to be aware of that. So here I am doing a little bit and then creases here. And then, like I say, a wash is where we just kind of thin coloring. Just kind of a hint in some places. And then we get the darks. We get the darks where the shadows would fall. Okay, so I'm not coloring every single part of his shirt, leaving some of the white highlights. I can always go back and add a little more later. So again, like I say, my colors are a little random. I'm just going to do his shorts in maybe this red here. And I have used my colors so much here that I sometimes don't even know what color I'm grabbing. That's okay. You just have fun. Have fun with it. So I get a lot on here. If I find that I've got a lot on the brush, I'll make sure I do the shaded parts. Then as it fades out, I can move towards the light. Move towards the light. So there we have water on my brush. This is a really nice little kit that I have here, but any watercolors will do. The more expensive the watercolors you get, the better the pigment. So you'll have much darker, vivid colors if you spend a little more. So here we go. Getting a nice shadows on there, and I can add some wrinkles to here if I want to. There. And I'm going to do, now he's got fluffy slippers on. Let's take a look at what we've got so far. He's got these fluffy slippers on, so I'm going to do those in a kind of a teal if I've got something like that. I think I do. And you can get watercolors that have much wider palette than what I have here. I have a very limited palette, but more than enough for what I do. This is my favorite. I have a couple watercolor kits. This one happens to be my favorite, and it comes with this little brush that I'm using, and it has a nice get a nice coloring with this too. These are pretty nice watercolors. So I'm going to add a little more water to this. Spread out his little feet there. When I'm doing greeting cards, I frequently use this to color my cards because I love the way it looks. All right, so as we're building this up, I think I'm going to do his skin next. And what we're going to do for that, I always have kids asking me, oh, I don't have a skin color. Well, what the heck is a skin color? I've talked about that in my other videos because, there really is no one skin color. We're all so different. So here's what I do for this guy. I'm going to picture him as kind of pale because he's not gone outside much. And I'll probably use a little bit of red, but I'm going to do it a really light wash. Okay. So I'm going to mix it up here a little bit. And I really want this to be super light, and I definitely want to leave a lot of highlights on his skin. And we can always add a little bit of, see, here's the thing. You can use this as your palette up here too, to mix your colors up with. And this is actually darker than I would have wanted it, but it's okay. It's all good. Mix it right in there. Add some water. Now there's another way to work with watercolors too, where you can actually wet the paper first. It's called wet on wet. And I'm not going to get too much into that technique today. I might touch on it a little bit when we get to someplace. All right, so now I'm going to go down his legs. And I just leave some places. Notice I'm just using very, very light colors here. I'm just picking up what was left in my palette, basically. And there I've got them colored in. Maybe it's a little more red than I would have wanted, but it works for the cartoon. Totally works. And you can experiment with different colors too. I could have added a little bit of yellow in there, but that's going to be good for now. All right, so we want the chair to be a different color than him. So let's go with the earth color. I've got some different browns in here. I'm going to go with, this kind of looks like a burnt sienna here. My little cheat sheet actually tells me what the colors are, but who the heck can read this anymore? So we're going to go with this one. Let's see what it looks like. Yeah, this will work. This will totally work. And this I can really kind of go to town with because I got a really big space here. I can have fun. Now, if you're doing a larger area, in other words, a much larger, if you were painting this whole paper, one color or something like that, you'd want to go with a bigger brush perhaps, but I got this nice little brush here, and it works just fine for all of what I'm doing. I can even do the larger areas with this. I'm fine with that. And so I just realized that I probably should have turned that fan off. It's making an awful lot of noise, but we'll give it a shot. Because I hope the microphone is playing this way, so it should be all right. Just hear the fan in the background. It's hot today. It's a hot one. All right, so now I get a little bit of shade, a little bit of darker behind where his head is. So I can do that in dark. Also where his body comes in contact with it. I'm not too concerned about it. We want to have a contrast here so that he doesn't blend into the chair. That's our main concern here. Add some water to this. Get this lighter on this side. Spread it out. Also, if you do what I just did here, and you get a lot of water in one spot, you can just use a little bit of the corner of paper towel or even a dry brush, and you can just kind of soak that up. Okay, now indicate in here a little bit. Remember, a reminder, we're doing cartoons, so nothing has to be perfect here. At least not in my world. Not at all. I got darker right here, so I'm going to use it behind his legs and then spread it this way. Let it lighten out this way. I like to let the paint kind of determine how it's going to look. Kind of surprises me as it goes along. Remember, the brush is your friend. Don't beat up your brush. Now I've got some wooden legs on here. That's what we got so far. Okay. I've got some wooden legs on here. Those I'm going to use the dark brown for. I think I've got like a dark brown here. Burnt umber or something like that. Who knows? Oh. A little bit of a contrast here. Nice. That works. All right, so the TV set, we're going to do that in black, which will actually result in kind of a gray, because I'm going to do a wash with the black. Let me do that in now if we want to. Actually, here's where we'll do a little bit of wet on wet so you can see what happens. So I'm just putting water. Just water. Now with this paper, it's going to soak it up really quick, so I got to kind of scoot along here. So now I'm applying wet paint to wet paper. Now if you're using a sketch pad, be careful, because this, you don't want to go over it too much when it's wet, because this paper will tear easily, very easily. We refer to this as worrying the paper if you go too much pushing and pulling and all that kind of stuff when it's wet, because you will go right through. All right, so now a little bit on top here. And I like to be, I don't worry about staying in the lines and stuff like that when I'm doing this, because it can be very free. Very free. Let it flow. Unless we're in a spot where we really have to do a lot of detail. Here I'm doing wet on wet again. This area would be great with a little bit bigger brush, but again, I'm not worried about it. All right, let's put our black in. Do this whole TV, get her done. We want that marker to show through, because that defines the television. So see, right here, I want that line to show, so I don't want to go too dark on it. And your paper will buckle. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It will totally buckle. When I'm doing, like I say, when I'm doing cartoon greeting cards, I would probably use a heavier paper, but this, if I were using this paper, it's fine if it buckles, because then I make copies from it. Okay. All right, so as you can see, I've slopped some paint on here. It's not a big deal. I don't care. I'm going to paint over that anyways, and it'll just help us define different things. So we get a pizza in here. Let's throw a little orange on that pizza, see what happens here. Oh yeah. That baby stands right out. And then there's some pepperoni on it, so if I really wanted to go crazy with some definition, I will pop a little red on them. And that's what we got. Here's our pizza. It's coming along, right? All right, so we have him done. We have his chair done. Let's do the table in. And I'm going to use another brown for that as well. I think I'll use that darker brown that I used on the feet. That's going to be our wood color for this cartoon. I'm not doing wet on wet, so I can get a little more detail here. Really control where that's going. This is fun, actually. Slam some up in there. remember our table, as you can see, trails off into the distance. I did not finish the table, so watch what I do here. You know, you could certainly finish it, but I'm just going to let it go off. I'm going to define where the TV is, but I'm just going to let it fade out. Now this part I think would be a little in the shade, so I'm going to do this nice and dark. And this part I'm going to do even darker if I can do that, if I can pull it off. I have to turn the paper this way so I don't put my hand in the wet paint, because I'm famous for doing that. So this already has, excuse me, this already has some marker to define that it's darker. And we do want that to show. And then I'll do the legs. Again, they fade right out. Okay, so that's what we have so far. Cool. Now, there's a couple of things that I'm not going to do in this particular drawing, and normally I probably would. The background, that's what I was talking about before. If you look at the wall behind him, that's a lot of space. I would get a bigger brush for that, a little bit bigger brush, and kind of do all that in. And that's something that, again, it depends on how you work. I may have wanted to do that first to get the background done. I'm not concerned about it at this point because I really am more concerned about demonstrating how our, let's use a different color, how our watercolor technique works out as far as this goes. Remember, this is not really watercolor painting. This is how I use this technique for this particular art form, okay? So when I'm doing cartoons, this is the way I would use watercolors. I've shown you in previous videos how I use marker and how I use colored pencil. This is really one of my favorite looks. I love the way this looks. And let's do, you know what? Let me just show you, if you are going to do a little bit of shading, how you could do something like that too. Watch this, this is cool. And I would do probably this sort of thing just a little bit, just to indicate where something is, giving a shadow. I wouldn't do it if I was going to paint the floor, but for this particular exercise, I can show you just how this might look. This pizza box, we've got a little shadow going on here, so we can just kind of give a hint, because the box will be white. And then, oh, I also have some paper floating around here, so I could just do this, a little hint of that. So this gives you a little bit of a representation of what it would look like. Do a little bit of detail here just to add to it. And this could be considered finished, okay? So I did a little bit of shadows here. Obviously, these are not realistic. It just gives you a hint that, oh, this is right on the floor. Notice what I did. If these are rolled up papers, I just did this as a little, you know, as a white paper, gives a little bit of a shadow. And you could do like a little more that is actually casting a shadow, kind of like that. And then a little bit with the pizza box. And then the wall and the floor. If we wanted to, we could do those in color if we wanted to go crazy. But remember, we want our cartoon to stand out too. So maybe by not adding some, that might be the way to go. You know what I'm saying? So this gives you an idea of how I would color in watercolor. And remember, the key thing is to have Lots of fun. Enjoy it. And remember, watercolors they can be pretty forgiving when you're doing something like this. Just have fun with it, okay? We will see you next time.